says ready, join me, yeah, join meeting.
Do you mind your voice? Yeah, it's been really.
Tell me when you. Hello. 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 Mama. Ooh. I didn't mean. It wouldn't be a very long one if I did. Can you hear me all right back there? And through WebEx or whatever you're looking at? Lit.
Oh, great.
Yep, it's on YouTube.
Testing.
A level out of things, so it
go.
goes, well, one of those, I'm like, that's sad. Oh, I just. Everything, so
Okay.
mine. Everything's fine. I remember that, I think I tried the first time.
Yep.
And like, oh boy, you maybe able to like get rid of it all. And I think Donna was having a problem one time with hers and it's like, I was hitting, she said, whatever, I'm here like, you need to hit function.
Have you ever seen that book?
That's for me,
Tuesday.
because I decided to. That.
Right.
Oh, mine always looks, I don't have a picture of it or anything.
And you're her. Stop.
This.
$1. There.
Oh, okay.
That's what I was looking for.
My bad.
That's what I was looking for. Sorry, that confused me.
Oh.
That's all. Thanks.
I don't know if you live video streamed.
It's just
The whole time. Look at me roll my eyes like.
All your exceptions.
Got it.
That's not extra paranoid. I don't care in case someone flips it, but I know it's like.
Oh, true.
If I had to talk to you today, there's another couple.
There he is.
Oh, yep.
Give it a choice.
And one tomorrow night.
Looked. All right, ready? I'd like to call this meeting to order, a regular meeting of the Committee of the Whole on Tuesday, October 24th at 6:30 PM in the Germantown Village Hall Boardroom, also can be accessed via WebEx. This meeting has been given public notice in accordance with sections 19.83 and 19.84 of the Wisconsin statutes in such form that will apprise the general public and news media of subject matter that is intended for consideration and action. Roll call shows all committee of the whole members present except for trustee Pieper, who may be joining us either a little late or via WebEx, and trustee Myers, who is excused. Next item on the agenda is approval of minutes from the October 17th, 2023 meeting. Committee,
I'll make a motion to approve the minutes as written.
motion made and seconded. Any discussion on the motion to approve the minutes? No discussion. All those in favor, please say aye. Aye. Opposed? None opposed? Motion carries. Takes us then to 2024 all other budgets review, and we'll start this by turning the meeting over to Matthew, the budget director. Give us any updates, overviews, or information that he feels is pertinent to start off the meeting. Matthew.
Good evening. We have Phil Costin here tonight from Ehlers to provide some information regarding the tax increment districts. I'd like to invite him up now to go over some of the reports that he had provided for you. Right here.
Yep. Perfect.
All right, good evening, Phil Costa with Ehlers. Good to be back with you today, tonight. My apologies, it's not on the big board. I did give you a hard copy. I sent it this morning. I had a little bounce back from the clerk who was not here. I'm going to walk through each of the districts just based on the information that I've provided to you. So You're aware that you have 4 active tax increment districts. TID number 6, 7, 8, and 9 are all active now. You'll see I have detailed reports here for 6, 7, and 8. TID 9, which was created last year, does not have any reporting requirements yet. That'll be next year because we have no incremental value. That'll kick in next year. And then there'll be expenses in 2024 as well. I shared with Steve earlier today when we talked that there really should be no budgetary impact for TID number 9 in 2024 because we did issue some debt related to that district, but we also capitalized the interest that was going to be due in 24 as part of that borrowing. So really no budgetary impact on TID 9 and 24. 25 will be a different story. And when we come back next year, we'll talk about TID number 9 in more detail at that point. So I'm going to start with 6, and then I'll walk through each one of these, and they're all going to look very similar. I have like an executive summary in the first page. I have the map showing the area, followed by a cash flow, which is put together as of yesterday with some detailed information that I received from the village staff. And then at the back end is what's called the PE 300 report. And that PE 300 report is what is due every year for every tax increment district in the state of Wisconsin by July 1st. And really, if you think about what it is, it's backward looking. It's what happened last year. What we're taking with the cash flows and our kind of projection forward of what it looks like. So the PE, I'm not saying it's not useful. It's useful looking back, but you also have that in your 22 audit now as well. So that's how each one of these are structured. So let's talk about TID 6 real quick. You can see the map that's been included in this area, Willow Creek Business Park, TID number 6, which was created back in 2014 as a mixed use and industrial district. This is a district that has a 20-year allowed life. So we're well into that life cycle of this tax increment district. The base value, you'll see this kind of same language throughout. The base value is the value that was on the property, these properties, when you created the tax increment district. So the base value when you created that was $2,796,400. Why is that important? That the first 2.8 million that's collected gets shared with all the taxing bodies. That's part of the base value. So school, county, technical college, village, all get their share of that first $2.8 million. The incremental value, what growth has occurred above and beyond that, is as of January 1, 2022. That's the most recent information. That comes out every August 15th of 23 for valuation year end year 2022. Right now, that has grown to 41.6 million. So that growth, that's the new growth above that 2.8 million, is the $41.6 million that has occurred. We then talk about year-end fund balance. I apologize, that should be 22 year-end fund balance, not 21 year-end fund balance. I didn't make that correction. Your year-end 22 fund balance in TID number 6 is 260,967. Meaning you have a positive fund balance in that tax increment district as it stands right now. And you'll see in the cash flow, we project that will continue going forward. So in this district, the last site is really being developed now. So there's really no room to develop beyond where you are right now in TID 6 unless you would do an amendment. Therefore, there's not a lot of expenditures expected as well. So we don't project a lot of new expenditures, just some annual administrative costs that the village incurs to operate these tax increment districts going forward. So that's a quick summary. There's the map, and then we'll talk about the cash flow. So on page 3, the only development left is the building being constructed by Dickman Companies. You can see in the middle of that page, you'll see where it says Dickman Building. $17.6 million is what's been projected for that. Most of that will be developed in 23. There'll be a little bit of carryover of value in 24. They expect it to be wrapped up in 24. That'll push this incremental value to about 59.2 million by the end of that building being constructed and valued. On page 4, that will then generate revenue. And so these are going to look very similar as we go through this as well. And we've made a couple of key assumptions in each of these scenarios or each of these districts. First, you'll see we have no property appreciation, no value increasing for a couple of reasons. One, a lot of the buildings in TID 6 are more kind of that light industrial type buildings. A lot of times they don't increase in value much, unlike real estate or some commercial buildings, et cetera. And while we saw a 13% growth statewide in valuation this last year, I don't see that being the norm going forward for very much longer. So we have no valuation increase. So if we showed like a 1% increase every year, that would just increase the revenue in the shown in the tax increment district. So we're trying to be a little bit conservative here, show no inflationary growth. The second is you'll see you've had a declining tax rate. You're not alone. Pretty much everybody through the state of Wisconsin has been seeing a declining tax rate. If you have a 13% growth factor around the state of Wisconsin and you're living under levy limits and you can only grow by net new construction, and maybe that's 3, 4, 5%, maybe 2% in some cases, you're going to have something given. That's been the mill rate. So the mill rate's been dropping throughout the state of Wisconsin and all over. So as a, for instance, you went from $16.70 per thousand equalized tax rate in 2022, and it dropped to $15.56 in 2023. So you are seeing a declining tax rate. At one point, this was about $17, $18 per thousand. So we are showing the continued drop in tax rate, but 1% drop. Again, I don't see where we're going to continue to see this big swing and increase in valuations. So if that doesn't occur, then we'll see mill rates kind of level out, I think, as well. So those are the really key assumptions that we make in each one of these, trying to be a little bit conservative with the estimated revenues. On page number 5, which is kind of a fold-out page, that's to help me because I have a hard time seeing these numbers anymore. But you'll see that we have identified an overall cash flow for this tax increment district. You can see the projected cash inflows that we just went through what those are. We have in the blue columns the projected cash outflows, and there's one item in here that's not an actual. Everything else is pretty much an actual. What's not an actual is that in 2024, we are talking about issuing a revenue bond. If you were part of the utility meetings, there are a number of projects that are forthcoming, and there's an allocation of the new well project that would be to the tax increment districts. In fact, much of that will be paid by the tax increment districts. And each district, we have identified their allocable share of that well project. So that's in the middle of the page. That is a future expense. That is not an actual at this point that we have built in here, knowing that that's likely going to happen in the future. We've also built in some professional service costs, just if you have attorney's fees and those kind of fees along the way, some admin costs. And you can see we have a positive cumulative balance, second column from the right, through the life of this district. And hopefully by about 2031, 2032, this district would close out. I think probably as early as 2031. And again, here, unless there is an amendment to this district to add additional territory, I don't see why this district wouldn't just kind of close out over time. So we think about 2031, 2032 will be the closure. So that's TID 6. I went through that relatively quick. Any questions? This is, again, in good financial shape.
No question?
Want to add something, Matthew?
Yeah, if I could just add on here, here's the TID 6 budget for 2024. As Phil mentioned, there's not a lot of activity going on in TID 6 right now. The major costs are the debt service payments for those bonds that help support TID 6. And at the bottom, you'll see the increment that we're projecting that way. So I just wanted to add that.
Yep, thank you. And I guess when it comes up, I'll wrap this up in each one. I don't expect that there will be any expense related to TID 6 that can't be picked up by existing increment. So really no levy support at all need, or water and sewer utility support needed to support tax increment district number 6 for 24 budget.
Phil, based on your projection of closing in 2031, then it would close after 17 years instead of the full 20?
Correct.
Okay.
Yes.
I don't know if this is for you or for Matt. Are we supporting any, in TID 6, any of the salaries for those?
Yes.
Okay. Is that shown any?
Pretty modest, I think.
Yep. So the total salaries in TID 6 is about $12,000.
And that's through the life of TID 6, correct?
That's annually.
Right.
Yep.
Any other questions on 6? All right, now you have the formatting down. I can probably run through these a little bit quicker because a lot of the key assumptions are going to be the same. TID 7, again, we've included the map for tax increment district number 7. This was originally created for JW Speaker. Then, if you recall, back in 21, I think, that we extended it to the north and west to Holy Hill Road for the Capstone Quadrangle Industrial Park. So that is the boundary map as it stands right now for TID number 7, which again was created back in 2017, again for JW Speaker. Then again amended back in 21 to add some additional territory and costs. The base value, which is a combination base value of the original area plus the amended area, is $9,642,400. Again, that first $9 million in value gets distributed to all the taxing bodies. Right now, the incremental value in this district is $23.6 million. So that's what new growth has occurred out there, and there's going to be a substantial amount of growth beyond that. Year-end fund balance, $462,645, again, in the positive at this point in time. Here, very similar, there'll be some administrative costs. There'll be the costs related to that well project. I'll talk about that again in a little bit. And we're expecting here also that we could see an early closure on this tax increment district. So in the cash flow, there's a couple of developments that we've been asked to add. Capstone building number 2, $20 million of starting in mostly completed in 23, wrapped up in 24. And then Capstone building number 3, 2024 project, the combination of $40 million between those projects, and expected about $63 to $64 million of total value once those are completed. What we don't have in here is anything further coming from JW Speaker at this time, or anything beyond the Capstone development. There is some additional area there that could develop, but we haven't shown anything in our projections beyond that. Similar assumptions, again, a 1% declining tax rate, no property appreciation factor on page number 4. So that's the increment it generates. And then we have a cash flow here like the last, and I'll kind of pause for a second and just let you know, I had a conversation with Administrator Krecklow today about the JW Speaker Development Agreement. And you can see the 4th column from the left where we show some potential shortfall payments. We kept that in because that's kind of the math behind it, that there could be shortfall payments that they are due per their development agreement. But Steve wanted me to mention that that's an ongoing discussion with JW Speaker. Nothing that's been fully resolved. There may be an amendment to the agreement, not sure at this point, but they're having ongoing discussions with them. No shortfall payment due in 23 from them. The first would be in 2024, if that's how it plays out. All the obligations are existing except for, again, you'll see a water revenue bond 2024, similar to tax increment district number 6, a portion of the new well project, again, allocated back against tax increment district number 7. And again, here we have some professional service and administrative fees. I think the focus here should be on the bottom line number, the cumulative. If you look at the year on the right and row the column next to it where it says cumulative, we're really focused on the cumulative cash flow to make sure that there's going to be enough money in this district going forward to be able to meet all its obligations. And I think the only question mark we have in here, well, two, where the valuations will come in from the capstone projects. We just won't know until they're wrapped up. And then two, what happens ultimately with the JW Speaker development agreement. So those are really the two a little bit unknowns here. But again, this district, we expect will be able to cash flow going forward and close out early.
Trustee Ball.
Yeah, Phil, why do you go into the red in the annual balances for 2030, 31, and 32?
Just the structure of the debt as it is right now. Now, we could avoid that potentially by how we structure that, what the new, if there's a new issue, we might be able to structure that different. It's just that's the annual shortfall, but there's still enough fund balance in the district, if you look at the column to the right, to be able to absorb that.
So it's nothing we should be concerned about at this time.
Correct.
Thank you.
Trustee Chan Miller.
Closure is, according to this, I'm going by your yellow highlighted 2033. Is that
Correct.
right? And I get, this might be a question for Mr. Krecklow or Matt, maybe you know, why are we waiting or letting JW Speaker do the shortfall payments?
I would have to pass that question on to Administrator Krecklow. I'm just not familiar enough with that.
Yeah, you have I've read the agreement. You have an existing development agreement with them that calls for them, it called for them to hit a certain valuation.
Right.
And if they fell short of the valuation, then there would be a makeup payment essentially from them. And that's what we're reflecting there is that makeup payment.
So the makeup payment is not in our, it hasn't been deposited. Is that right?
They would have to make a makeup payment to the TID on an annual basis if they didn't hit that valuation.
Starting in 2024.
Correct.
Okay.
That's why we're negotiating and talking with them now, because there is a developer's agreement that states that they must meet these standards.
Okay, that's good. Thank you.
So you're closing out in 16 years on this one?
15. I get 15.
Yeah.
Unless my math's wrong.
Okay, 15 years? I'll change my note. Thank you.
Just to add before we move on to number 8, in part of the 2022A bond issuance, there was $700,000 that we bonded for the development of a recreation trail within TID number 7. And I highlighted that in the street improvements line for the TID number 7 project.
Any other questions on 7, or I'll jump into 8? All right, I'll keep going. TID number 8, I think everybody's well aware of what TID 8 is. It's out on Holy Hill Road, off I-41, 45, and then east of Goldendale Road. Originally created for the Briggs and Stratton building at that time, back in 2018 as a mixed-use district. There's been kind of explosive growth out there, as you can see from the freeway. This is a district that the base value, again, it was mostly farmland assessed, so it was very small base value there at that time, $640,000, has grown to $180 million of incremental value in that tax increment district. I looked back to yesterday when I was putting these together, and the most we expected out of that district was about 118 million. So it's obviously far exceeded that from a valuation standpoint. There is a negative fund balance in here of 686,000 that'll be wiped out next year. And I'll go through that in a little bit. And again, there'll probably be some further expenditures into number 8. So I didn't really try to project when this district will close out, and I'll show you why in a little bit, because there's a significant amount of cash that's being generated here. So the new projects, if you go to TID number 3, I'm sorry, page number 3, the new projects that are out there in 2023, Zilber Building number 6 at 20 million, and the Dickman Golden Pet Building in 24 at 8 million. Those are the only 2 developments that have been projected for this area going forward. With those, it'll jump it to about $209 million in value, generating well over, almost $3 million of annual increment in this district. So if you go to the cash flow, you'll see that projected at this point annually, we're going to see over roughly $2 million of excess revenue to obligations annually. So there's a couple of opportunities with TID number 8. This is just coming from me, not from anybody else on the village at the village staff level, but this is a district that certainly could close out very early and jump back in the tax rolls. This is a district that certainly could be expanded if it makes sense to expand to add additional capital expenditures around the area, knowing that you have a substantial amount of money coming in every year. This could also be a district that down the road could be a donator to a new district as a possibility to help kind of buoy a possibility of a new district as well. So this will, because of the overall strength and cash flow of this district, you certainly have the ability to look at, what opportunities are out there for the village over the next number of years. You don't have to make that decision anytime soon. Even with with these numbers right now, it's going to be, another 6-7 years before you could close out this district. So there'll be time to make those decisions along the way, but it's a very healthy cash flow, a very strong tax increment district, and we expect in the future that there'll be some good decisions to be made with this district, no matter which direction you go.
Questions, trustee Baum?
Okay, at one point you said you didn't want to make a guess at the one we could close out, but you have a guess in here.
Well, I do. It's just pure numbers. So I just took the actual number that you could close it. If nothing else happened besides what we show right here,
Yep.
It would be as early as 2029.
Okay, if we close out in 2029, what is the dollar value that would potentially come to the village in taxes off of all that property? Is that going to be one of the numbers on this page somewhere?
Oh, it's not on this page. I'd have to, it's something I can get you very easily. It's just a pretty simple calculation of, there's 3 impacts when you close a district out. The first impact is if there are funds left in the TID account, those funds get distributed to all the taxing bodies.
Mm-hmm.
The second impact is, in addition to net new construction under levy limits, you get a TID adjustment when you close out a district, which would have the ability to create and open up additional levy capacity at that point under levy limits. And then the third, because you can only capture 50% of that increase in levy limits, under levy limits, you'll see a mill rate drop for the village's portion. So it's really a little more complex when you close out a district. There are really 3 different impacts that are realized when you close out a district.
Is it possible for you to get us a Village of Germantown revenue by tomorrow night?
By tomorrow night?
Yeah, we have a committee of the whole meeting again tomorrow night where we're supposed to close out the budget. I'd like to know what potential revenue we have coming in 4 years from now.
I can tell you what the impact would be to the levy limits, given current levy limits. I mean, between now and 29, I don't know what's going to happen, but yeah,
Just give me a ball.
yeah, we can do that. Yep,
Our portion only is what you're asking.
Our portion only.
yep, I
Okay.
could do that.
I don't care what the school district gets. I don't care what the county gets. I just want to know what Germantown's going to get. Could get.
That's all you're interested in is what you mean.
That's all I'm interested in. For tomorrow night. That's all I'm interested in for tomorrow night. You want
Okay.
to talk about another
Matthew's
night?
gonna send me an email soon and tell me to remind me to do that.
Any other questions?
So, um,
Trustee Kaminsky.
Just a comment, not a question, but it sounds like these are very healthy districts. I'm really thankful for that, but I think we put a lot of work into them. But
I think I agree with you. They're all doing very well. Seven's probably a little more, have a few more unknowns going forward, but I think that'll work out very well and close out early.
6 is what's always been the one that was running a little bit closer, but
Yeah.
it seems to have righted itself. Any other questions? Trustee Jan Miller.
okay, so we have, are you gonna be talking about, debt service payback or at all, or is that a different,
That's
The
item
debt service
H.
budget,
pardon me?
the debt service budget.
Yes,
Yes, that is on the agenda tonight.
I wasn't presenting that. I think Matthew. was
okay,
presenting
just
that.
Matt's gonna do that, okay. So borrowing, um, we're at, should I save it for debt service? It's at 93 million.
Yeah, I would save it for item H. If
Okay,
it's a question in relation to debt service. Right now, we're on TIDS.
right. So the one that we can close earliest is, 8,
Mhm.
great. And, you said that you are not responsible for any of the other, financials. That's someone else in your group as far as the, our investments.
Yeah, as far as for investments, yeah, it's
It's Ellers.
Ellers, but it's not me. I'm not an
Right.
investment advisor, so
Okay.
that's a different group.
Okay.
If there are questions that come out of this meeting for them, I'm
Mhm.
sure we'll hear back from Matthew, and then we can get that response
Okay.
back to you.
Okay. So we're looking pretty good. I think that's all I have right now for the TIDS.
Okay. Trustee Ball.
Bill, you do analysis for TIF districts for communities all around the state, correct? Comparatively, how did these TIFs stack up to those? Are these doing incredibly well? Are they doing just marginally, or are they some of the bottom of the barrel ones who should never do this again? What is your professional opinion?
You're gonna be in the black in all three. That's great. TID number 8 obviously is kind of far exceeded expectations on valuation and how quickly it developed. You know, we ran those initial analysis, the build out was gonna take 10 plus years. So it's obviously that has really taken off and done very well. So it's unusual to see a district potentially close out in less than 10 years. That's very unusual. So I would say overall, probably performing a little better than what we see.
Thank you.
Trustee Jan Miller.
And one other question for probably Matthew. I had asked about TID number 6 and annually salary impact. And does that hold true for, is it the same amount for 7 and 8?
No, 7 and 8 have higher salary impacts. As there are more active TIDs, we allocate more of our time to those TIDs. The salary amount for TID number 7, just give me 1 second. For TID number 7 is $40,000,
Okay.
and for TID number 8, it is $83,000.
Okay. So we're still paying on all 3 of these, correct?
Correct.
What do you mean by we're still paying?
Annually, we're paying those amounts in each TID.
We're billing the TID for the work that's done by each of the different departments that are active within that TID. So on TID 8, there's a water department with the new well, that time is billed to the TID. If there's some administration concerns or duties, the time that the administration department would do during handling those issues would be billed to the TID.
Mhm.
So it offsets the salaries. It doesn't cost additional. So you'd be paying that salary anyways to each of those different department heads or whomever's doing the work. The TID allows the opportunity to bill it, and it would pay those salary amounts in a difference. Do you understand? Do you
Yeah.
get what I'm saying?
Yeah,
Okay.
the-
So it's not
it's-
what we're paying, it's what it's offsetting.
it offsets it, but we're paying it for a longer period of time, unless we're paying it off every year, right?
Well, the increment generated helps to pay off the note. And then we're able to, based on its revenues, bill it for additional time that our staff takes to help manage it.
So we're taking it out of, we're taking the annual salaries out of the
Each
What
of the
we-
3 TID funds.
the
Right.
TID fund.
Instead of
That
levying
is,
for all of those.
Offset those salaries for time spent on each of those 3 funds.
okay,
Whatever activity it is, even if it's highways or public works or any of it.
hmm
Any other questions? Mr. Casa? Anything else for us?
Nope, nothing. Thank you.
Thank you, Phil, for coming. We appreciate it very much.
Thank you.
You know, Jolene is asked.
I did.
Oh, okay,
Otherwise,
excellent.
I'll need you to send me an email to remind you to remind you.
All right, then that then takes us to item B, which is impact fees.
Yep, and I just wanted to touch a little bit on TID 9. As Phil stated, these expenses are capitalized, so you won't really see these in the budget. But TID 9, the major project that will be going on in 2024 is the the project related to Donjas Bay Road and driving in the utilities for that road. That's estimated to cost around $2 million. So I just wanted to provide some of that information there. And for those at home who are curious, the salaries allocated to TID 9. And I didn't even put it in here. It's roughly $47,000.
Any questions? No questions? We can go to impact fees.
So as many of you know, the village has several impact fees that are collected as new residences or commercial buildings are built through their permitting process. And I just wanted to highlight some of the projected revenues and expenses here. For the police impact fees revenues, there's no major changes compared to the prior years. We're estimating around just under 20,000 in revenues, and 12,000 typically is transferred to the debt service fund to help pay for additional capital projects that the police department has.
Questions? No questions? Historic preservation. I'm sorry.
They're all in a row. There's just one line item, but I have all the impact slides.
Okay, go
Here.
ahead.
Okay. Yep. Not each department. For the ones that we do have impact fees, which are police, fire, recreation, library, and water, they each get, there's different rates per impact fee, and those rates haven't changed in several years. I'm not exactly sure. I don't recall what they are each, but they're different values per residential building. Yep. It was calculated by ordinance. I don't know the last time they were recalculated. Correct. There's an ordinance that the village board adopted, at least a decade ago, probably more, regarding impact fees.
If you want to change impact.
Well, you have to go through studies. I think Director Retzloff, you have kind of a step-by-step of what it would take to initiate that? Anita, you got to go to Mike, sorry.
Thank you. The process would be quite involved and would involve doing a thorough analysis or assessment of all of our existing facilities for a particular type. I mean, the general principle is that you're charging new growth for their proportionate share of what the rest of us who live here have already paid and utilized as part of that particular facility. So you should be updating them fairly regularly to keep up to date with improvements that you make, whether they be improvements to public works, water, sewer, like for example, the sewer impact fee. That's the only one that automatically adjusts every year by 3%. And that one is in the $3,600 range, I believe, at this point. The other ones have been at the same, as Matt pointed out, for a number of years. So I believe Steve is looking into, I don't know if it's in this year's budget or next year's budget, to initiate that process of updating some, if not all, of the impact fees.
Thank you.
That's what I know.
Okay, thank you. Appreciate it. Trustee Rick Miller.
If I recall, don't the impact fees have to be utilized in a certain period of time?
Yes, they do.
Are we getting close to any of those timelines? Does anybody know that answer?
For these ones, we're not getting very close to any of the timelines. For the library one specifically, each year that was used to pay off the building. Now that building is paid off, at some point we'll have to start spending those, since it's been closed now or paid off for a couple of years. But historically, we have tried to spend them, not as they come in, but a portion of them as they come in, so we don't run into that issue.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Jeff.
I'll keep flying through some of these unless anybody has any questions. For fire impact fees, I bumped it up slightly, just based on the last couple of years of actuals. I wanted to match what we had been seeing in that area. On the library impact, I did decrease them slightly, just based on the last couple of years of actuals. This is a conservative estimate, trying to match what we had seen in 21 and 22.
Did you say decrease?
I decreased the estimated revenue to match kind of closer to what we've seen in 21 and 22.
Okay, but that's just based on the units, the impact fee itself.
Correct.
The base
Correct.
hasn't changed. It's just.
Correct. Just the estimated revenue, I'd be happy
got
if it goes over.
Thank you.
Yep. Similar to library, I decreased the recreation impact fee revenue just based on the historical actuals. I believe that does it for impact fees.
Any other questions for impact fees? None? Okay, historic preservation.
Historic preservation, there are no major changes here. The largest expense is typically, and I'll be honest, I'm less familiar with this fund, but typically a nice gentleman comes in to help hang some photos with some frames, and that's typically some of the expenses.
Yeah, I'm the chair of historic preservation, and a couple things that are expenses, and honestly, our members do not take their stipends, so that was always a part of it. and have always rolled that over, or I guess just left it in the budget. The other thing we're doing is we're going to be building out the wall with frames over here, just like you mentioned, Matthew. And we're in the process of, we've got the frames, we now have to get them matted so that it matches the other ones that are out there already. So that's our big expense next year is photo frames. That's it.
Okay. Any questions? Go to recreation facility.
Here at the recreation facility fee fund, there are no major changes to this fund. This fund is used to help maintain some of the facilities that the recreation department uses in conjunction with the school district. Some of the revenues are payments from the athletic clubs for the fields and things such as that. There are no major changes to this budget.
Any questions? There's no questions. Can go to senior van replacement.
Much like many of the other funds, there are no major changes here. We're projecting the revenues to stay relatively flat compared to where they have been for the senior replacement van. I know a few years ago, I believe before my time, this fund helped pay for a new van. And that's what these revenues go towards.
There a balance in an account somewhere?
There is a balance in the account, and that you will see that tomorrow when we post the budget hearing document. I believe it's around $30,000.
Okay.
No questions. Go to item F, health.
The village has a health insurance fund. This is where we collect revenues partially from the village and partially from employees. This year's budget has a 3% built-in increase in premiums. And it is considered best practice to raise those slightly to maintain a healthy fund balance for the health fund. You know, some years, since we are self-insured, we have better financial years than others, and it's good to have a healthy fund balance there for the years where the expenses overmatch the revenues.
Trustee Nyrider.
Matthew, one question. You have 3% increase in premiums. Is that standard compared to other years, or what? Do you remember what we were last year?
I don't know if Aaron is here. I don't recall what it was last year. So this year for our renewal, there was no increase in premiums. What we decided as staff is to increase that slightly to build in a little cushion to increase our fund health balance.
Okay.
The last couple of years, I think they were somewhere around 7%, but without Aaron being here, I couldn't tell you exactly.
Have the number of users
Aaron
gone
is
up? Oh, I'm sorry.
I lied. Aaron is here. I couldn't see her. Sorry, Aaron.
I can't remember.
Light is off, it's on.
Okay. I'm not exactly sure what it was last year, but it was higher. We did go through a plan redevelopment, so it was a little different. But this year we did 3%, which is pretty good considering the state is going at 14%. So I think the 3% is a good choice.
Have the number of users gone up?
No, it's remained relatively the same.
Okay.
I'm so sorry. I'm sick. So
Okay.
please.
Thank you.
Any questions? No questions?
Yeah.
Go to dental, please.
Much like the health insurance fund here, the revenues are up about 5%. That is just a slight increase based on the number of users for the dental program. Depending on if they have a single or family, it's around $900 a year. So you get a couple that join the dental plans where you get that $4,254. On the expenditure side, I just tried to match that closer to what we had seen in previous years for dental expenditures.
Any questions? Okay, next item, item H, debt service.
So before you is the recommended budget for the debt service levy or for the debt service fund budget. As you'll see, it decreased slightly compared to last year. This is mostly the result of the board deciding for the 23 budget not to bond for capital projects and instead use general fund reserves to pay for those projects. Since we didn't have, an additional debt service payment, we saw a slight decrease in the overall debt service levy of about $22,000.
Trustee Jan Miller.
Debt service repayment plan. I mean, I'm just looking at this particular page.
What page are you looking at? I'm sorry.
The debt service page, this one. And I'm asking, what is the repayment plan schedule? What's the schedule?
As in
What are
when-
we paying?
annually over the next several years?
Yes.
I don't have that in front of me. That's something I can provide.
That'd
And
be
that's
great.
based on, current debt, not including, future debt. I think the total outstanding general obligation debt is around 100 million across all funds. And the debt service payment is obviously significantly less than that, but that is something I can provide.
That would be great.
Yep.
Thank you.
Other questions?
And we're taking out bonds on the debt service. How,
Nope, the debt service is paying off the bonds.
right. Oh, pardon me. What is the tax rate for those payments? Because 2022 versus 2023, I'm sure it's higher, right?
The mill rate would, it'd actually be lower. The debt service levy did decrease by $22,000. So if the debt service levy decreases slightly and assessed value goes up, the mill rate would decrease slightly. I don't know exactly what the debt service mill rate is. I can
Okay.
provide an overall mill rate.
That would be good to know.
Any other questions for item H? Item I.
In front of you is the 2024 recommended budget for inspection services. You'll see a slight decrease in salaries and wages. If you recall, in the 2023 budget, we had a position that was, we titled Code Enforcement Officer, just based on, the actions of 2023 and the projection of the 2024 budget. We didn't feel it was necessary to have that position budgeted. In addition, you'll see a rather large decrease in operating supplies and expenses. That's partially due to the decrease in projected development, as well as a change in revenue split projected for the 2024 budget with our Safe Built contract. On the revenue side, you'll see revenues down slightly. This is just based on a projected decrease in development revenues.
Trustee Nyrider.
With you or not, but what are the number of new homes from 22 to what do we guesstimate here for 23, the remainder of 23, the entire year?
I'm gonna pass that one on to our community development director.
In 2022, we had 41 new single-family homes that we issued permits for. So far this year, we're about 25. And the expectation is probably another 5 to 10. So it'll be down slightly. And then next year, the expectation is with the Heritage Park North coming online and sort of hitting a curve, hopefully as far as permits, and the balance of the Renwood North development with another 65 plus lots that will come online, that will be about the same as this year, maybe slightly lower. That's the expectation. We're just sort of expecting an overall downward trend in development, not a huge drop, but a drop nonetheless.
Thank you.
Trustee Baum.
Outsourcing of work, the only thing we're outsourcing is the safe build, and that is something that your staff does not handle anyway. Is that correct?
I oversee the Safe Built Inspection Services staff.
Okay, but is that something that you would hire that position in-house if we could find people to do it?
Yes.
Okay, so how much money did we spend in safe built this year, last year? What's it?
Matt, maybe you can help me out with that. You may recall that we brought Safe Built on board in the fall of 2019. And they've been with us ever since. And up until through this year, our proportionate share split of the revenues has been at 62% for Safe Built, 38% for the village. Going into 2024, we have negotiated a change in that split from 62-38 to 55-45. So the village is getting an additional on paper, it's additional 7%, but in reality, when you look at that 7% or the 7 as a percentage of the 38, it's actually an 18% increase in additional revenue. So for example, so far this year, with a gross revenue of just over 900,000, under the 62-38 split, Safe Built we would get 343,000. With the 55-45 split, we would get 406, almost 407,000, an increase of over 63,000. And that's locked in for 2024.
Yeah,
what we're still negotiating right now, and we would have to bring through GGF, is a further change to go from 55-45 to 50-50. And Safe Built is frankly has pushed back a little bit, and they're looking for a little bit more of an assurance. Right now, our contract, you could call it year to year, but realistically, we only need to give them a 60-day notice. And they're looking for at least 2, maybe a 3-year guarantee if we were to go to 50-50. You know, if that were the case, then using the same figures for this year so far, we would go from 343,000 to 451,000, an increase of just under 109,000 or 31.5%. So it's a significant change, but it comes at a cost, so to speak. It's a guarantee on their part to lock us in for a 2 to 3 year period.
And if we took that 63% and converted it to income for the village, that would be something like $500,000-$600,000 of revenue that we wouldn't be paying to Safe Build. We'd be bringing it in-house.
Well, certainly we would have to account for the cost for staffing, and right now,
That's what I'm getting at.
yeah,
At that $400,000 or $500,000, you could go hire the right amount of people to do this job in-house.
yes.
Problem being, you can't find those people right now.
It's difficult finding all the people that we need.
Yes.
Because there are a variety of skills that are required at the inspection level. It isn't just, your run-of-the-mill building inspector that can do all the inspections. There's commercial electrical that is significant, and those folks are relatively few and far between, which is one of the benefits of having Safe Built. They have different inspectors available at their disposal, not just with the different trades, but also given shifts in demand at any one point in time. If there's a run on the need for inspections out in the Holy Hill Gateway area for the multiple industrial buildings going on, they reach out to other inspectors in some of their other communities who come and help out. That's always been a problem for us when we had in-house staff, particularly in the years that I was overseeing the department, because we only had one inspector. We also would need to retain a full-time permit technician. So right now, Safe Built staff in the village hall, day to day, there's a full-time permit technician, there's a full-time building inspector, and there's another part-time person who's here available to respond to counter questions and inquiries, and also do other inspections as well. So we would have to do a more thorough assessment of what those costs would be
Right.
for those employees, assuming we could find them. Things aren't as bad, from what I understand, as they were in 2019. So that's why I'm a little hesitant to jump on the train of locking in for a 2 or 3 year period. It might almost be worth riding out a year to year and start looking at those costs in a more comprehensive approach, so we can make a more informed decision maybe next time this year or in the summer of next year.
And just to answer your question, Trustee Baum, just to answer your question, Trustee Baum, from January 1, 2022 through September 30th, 2023, we spent about 1.1 million. So roughly, $500,000, $600,000 a year.
And that was,
Trustee Jan Miller.
and that was the 1.1 million, Matt, was that
That was
for,
pre-safe built.
for safe built, right?
Yes.
Okay. All right. So I would agree with you, Jeff, that it's probably worth an assessment of reassessing what we're doing there. And I think my question would be Safe Built. They are a reputable company, but is there another company like Safe Built? Are there other companies like Safe Built?
There's some that have taken advantage of the gap in the trade. Some folks have gone out on their own individually and brought in some inspectors. They're relatively smaller. Safe Build is from my observation growing rather significantly in other communities because of their reputation. That's something also to keep an eye on in terms of whether they might get overstaffed or understaffed to handle all the communities that they work in. But so far, yes, they're very reputable in my opinion, and they've done a very good job for us. The one inspector that we've had since 2019, Alan, he does an excellent job. He really does.
So my last question, I believe, is if we are getting a higher portion of revenue back from Safe Built because we increase the percentage, why are we lowering the revenue?
So how it works in practice is that we record the full amount of the revenue, and then we expense, the portion that we pay to Safe Built. So if somebody owed $1,000, we'd
Yes.
record that $1,000 as revenue and
Right.
then pay, the 33 or $330 in out to Safe Built. So we record the full revenue regardless of our split.
And the reason the revenue is going to go down overall is because we're expecting development to go down
Go
as
down.
well. And our
Okay.
revenue is based on permit fees. Now, with that said, it's seemingly, I'd say if 7 out of the last 8 years,
Mhm.
we estimate this amount and we come in so much higher. So far this year, quite frankly, building construction permit revenue alone, our budgeted was 454,000. As of October 1st, we had collected 650,000.
Yeah.
So we're 200, almost $200,000 over what we expected in just that building construction revenue. So it looks like we're going to have another banner year in permit revenue.
Mhm.
But that doesn't make me feel any better about what the development is looking like down the road. I mean, you look at our plan commission agendas and the things that we're dealing with that are more and more are small projects or signs or conditional use permits. They're not like we've been dealing with in the last few years, the large industrial commercial projects.
Mhm.
Trustee Ball.
If we would open up more land for large boxes, we would get a lot more large boxes, but we don't want as many of those coming forward.
You went through that through the 2050 plan.
So that's what I see in the industry is those big boxes are going everywhere now. And they're still going strong.
Yeah, with just Capstone Building number 2, just under 300,000 square feet. The amount of building permit revenue is approximately $110,000 for one of those big buildings. You know, next year, we're looking at Capstone 3, Zilber 7, a building in TID number 9. There's talk of Green Bay Packaging, Midwest Products, and some anticipation of at least 4 minor additions to existing buildings in our industrial park. That's what the expectation is. It's been like that almost every year. Seemingly out of the blue comes a large building or a project we hadn't anticipated, and it's an extra 300,000, 250,000 square feet, which adds additional revenue. I'd like to say that, you know, and hope for that to happen again, but the reality is we're running out of space. So if we're going to be relying in large measure on industrial and commercial projects for development and for revenue that fuels the general fund, you know, we need to look at our industrial areas and our commercial areas in the village.
Right, choose wisely.
Any other questions for inspection services? No other questions? Then planning and zoning.
Moving on to planning and zoning, the biggest change in the 24 recommended budget is that we are required to do a housing study per the DOR. That's estimated cost around, I don't want to speak for Jeff here, but around $25,000. In addition, much like inspection services, we're projecting a decrease in projected development revenue.
Can I interrupt?
Jesus. Yes, you have.
I'm sorry, I'm not yelling. I'm actually talking very quietly.
Yes.
Um,
Go ahead, trustee Peeper.
so why are we spending $26,000 in something on a housing study when the county's paying for a housing study for us already that's going to be completed in a week or two?
Yeah, the study that the county is funding for us is a residential market study. The study that the DOR is required state statute requires us to do. As of 2019, we applied for and were granted an exemption for 4 years from the housing affordability report component of that statute requirement, and it's that statute provision that we have to address, and it's different than the market study that's being done, and it's focused specifically on affordability issues in the village and doing analysis of our existing housing stock, values, cost.
So that sounds exactly like the study that is being done right now. So what are the differences between those studies? Because that's exactly what the county's paying for to be studied is affordability, what housing we currently have, what housing is needed, etc.
Well, they're slightly different in a number of ways. Again, the one is going to be focused strictly on affordability issues, where the county study is a broader analysis of market demand throughout the not only just the county, but the Germantown as it fits into the region. There'll be some overlap, no doubt, and we may be able to borrow some information one from the other. But that's the information I received from a couple of consulting firms that do these affordability studies for communities indicated that, you know, we'll be looking at anywhere from $10,000 to $20,000. So we plugged in the $20,000.
At the study that we are currently having done right now and see if they accept that.
Well, they won't. There's certain specific standards that are called out for requirements in the statute that study isn't being prepared to specifically address.
Which specific statutes are being called out that are not being addressed in the study that we're having performed right now?
Well, I don't have those available with me at this point, but I'd be more than happy to detail that for you, Trustee Peeper, and we can talk further about that.
I just don't see the point of duplicating work when we have to spend $20,000 on a study when we're having that study pretty much already done for us, paid for by the county. And if the county provides 90% of the study that is needed per state statutes, then shouldn't the study be far less expensive?
Depends. Depends on how they write it up and how they report it and from where they're getting their numbers. I'm sure there's subtle differences, and as Jeff mentioned, there may be some areas that it can share information, but it's not apples to apples.
So then can we go back to the county and ask the county to make sure that the information that we need for the state statutes is included in that study?
No, we can't do that at this point. I mean, the study with the Tracy Cross report and study is hopefully going to be completed at the end of this month. So
So
that
can we go
train
back
has left the station.
across and ask them to do just a little bit more for a little bit more money that we'd pay out of pocket?
I don't think it works that way.
How so?
I mean, we could certainly try if that's what the board wants me to do. We can go back and talk to
mean,
Tracy
we can't
Cross and
even
ask
ask.
them what it would cost.
Is
I
it-
don't have that money in my budget this year to pay for that, but I'm sure some other department could
Aren't
decide to
we
come over.
waiting for those answers to do some other things and make some other decisions in regards to projects and development?
Yes, for one, because it's being funded by the study, it is looking at the potential market in Germantown for the next generation housing type of housing that fits into that program. So that's one of the things that will be looked at. It's also going to analyze market demand for the next 10 years that's projected for the different types of housing in the Germantown area and the surrounding region, and give recommendations to us as to what type of housing and development we should be providing for to satisfy the demand for housing in the village of Germantown. So it's going to be a study that'll have a number of recommendations on what the village should do going forward to provide for land use and development areas for housing to satisfy what they project to be the demand for different types of housing in the village of Germantown. At some point, we'll have to make that decision, what we do with those recommendations and whether we change our regulations to accommodate that. But with respect to Trustee Pieper's request, I'd be more than happy to reach out to Tracy Cross and ask them what it would cost to modify what the work they're doing now to satisfy this study, if that's what the village board would direct me to do.
Cost and time.
I would appreciate that. I mean, if it saves us 10, 20,000, it's worth it.
Needs a motion.
Okay, I make a motion to ask Tracy Cross to modify their study to include the statutes that we need to satisfy in order for this other study to be done,
The housing affordability report.
or the housing affordability report.
I'll second.
Motion made and seconded. Discussion. Trustee Baum.
Is the motion to ask her to do it, or is the motion to ask her what her cost and time frame would be to do it?
No, the motion is to ask if they're able to do it, and two, what the cost is to do it.
And time frame.
And time frame.
Yes,
Okay, that's not what I understood you to say. Thank you for the
Okay.
clarification.
no
That's-
problem.
I'll second with the amendment.
Well, okay. You understand the motion to be as stated by Trustee Baum. Okay. Trustee Hudson.
So is Tracy Cross contracted with us? Or are they contracted with the county? Because if they're contracted with the county,
The agreement is with the village of Germantown?
the agreement is with us,
Yes,
Paid for by the county.
paid for by the county.
that's correct.
Thank you.
But
Further discussion. Trustee Chan Miller.
I thought that the village of Germantown was paying the bill and then we get reimbursed by the county. Is that correct?
While the logistics may be that
Yeah,
the county's paying the bill.
correct. It's about 20,000, I think.
Mhm.
Is that correct?
I'm sorry, what was the question?
It's about 20,000 is the
It's
question.
about 20,000, correct?
Yeah, I can find that number for you. Fee of $17,750 with a $10,750 due at the contract execution and the balance of $7,000 due on the submission of the report.
Thanks.
Further discussion on the motion. Trustee Hudson.
So I'm not lost yet. So by changing this, are we going to jeopardize any of the funding coming from our good friends at the county?
That I don't know. At the same time, we'd have to talk to the county and ask them if this sort of side agreement, if you will, to do something extra, puts us in peril with regard to the county and the Next Generation program. We can ask that question. I don't know the answer to that.
It's a good question. Further discussion?
Thank you.
No further discussion? We'll do roll call vote, please.
Trustee Nyrather,
Aye.
Trustee Baum, Trustee Jan Miller,
Aye.
Trustee Hudson, Trustee Pieper,
Aye.
Trustee Rick Miller,
Aye.
Trustee Kaminsky, President Walter.
Aye. Motion passes. Back to the planning and zoning, Jeff
Matt, were you
or
done?
Matt? Is that,
If there are no other questions, that's.
no other questions? Okay, the next area is I'm sorry, Trustee Nyrider.
A couple of questions for either one of you. The associate planner, is that a possibility of hiring in 2024, full year, part year, or where's that at, Jeff?
Right now, the direction is to hire before the end of the year.
The end of this year?
Yes.
Okay. And then also on the contracted services for 65,000, 25 was for this housing study. Is the majority of the rest of that money for working on continuing on the 2050 plan, or where is the rest of that money going?
Yes, the intention is the additional 45,000 is for intended to get started on the next neighborhood district corridor master plan. And given the priority list, it would be the village center.
Okay, thank you.
Trustee Ball.
Was that also money that was provided by the county, or is that our funding?
That's our funding.
Our funding?
If we're able to get additional funds through the county, that would be great.
I thought there was some arrangement for them to pay for some of our studies.
I had heard that there was some discussion about the county possibly helping us out in that regard, but I do not know the status of that as far as it being a legitimate commitment at this point to really talk about.
We'll have to go back to the county and find out.
Trustee Jan Miller.
Is this 45,000 or for the study? Was this the study that you bid out for the 3 different 2050 plan areas, Holy Hill, Freistadt, and Village Center?
No, this is for to start the village center master plan.
And will that include resident input?
Yes.
And are you thinking this is going to be an outside company, or will the hire, whatever your, assistant planner be able to do this?
No, this money is intended for consulting services to supplement what staff can provide. And at this point, given the proposals we received and the comments we received from those consultants who didn't submit proposals on the other projects, The 45,000 is not going to cover the full cost. So the expectation is that we'll start the project probably, hopefully mid-year or in the fall. And we'll have to make contingency plans to fund the balance of it in a subsequent year,
Right, fall of
24.
2024. Thanks.
Anything else for planning and zoning? All right, recreation.
Before you is the 2024 recommended budget for the Recreation Department. As you can see, salaries and benefits make up roughly 2/3 of the budget. In the 2024 budget, based on where we were, a few months ago, we had to make some tough choices regarding some cuts for some departments, including the Recreation Department. As you'll notice in the line item, there's a 6% decrease in part-time salaries, as well as a 19,000 decrease in program supplies and expenses, while keeping revenues flat.
If this committee will indulge me, I'd like to start this out in light of the events that we had last night at Kennedy. I would like to publicly thank and recognize recreation part-time staff and instructors that took charge of the students that were involved at Kennedy Middle School. And they are Gabby Salfer, Peyton Bauman, Megan Hohensee, Karina Park, John Height, and Nathan Marzon. They stayed with the students. They escorted them to a safe area, comforted the students. Most important, they made sure all was accounted for, and they stayed in communication with supervisors who reached out to parents and kept them informed. And then they escorted them to MacArthur on buses. I just felt it was important that this committee know what our staff did last night. Thank you.
Thank you for sharing.
Okay. In your packet, you have a PowerPoint presentation. I'll go through some of it to explain some of the cuts and so forth, and staff will back me up on that. As Matt alluded to, in part-time salaries, we are looking at what we proposed originally at 450,000 to cut down to 405,000, which is $45,000 cut. In our program supplies and expenses, I'm sorry, we use the old accounting numbers. I know that in 2024, we'll start with the new Munis Tyler, but in the 3,800 account, we had requested 227,000. Reallocated 36,000 of that to go into the music and celebration. This is to help us because our Music in the Park program has grown to be one of the bigger programs that we do. In the past 4 years, that money has been taken out of the 3,800 account, but now with Matt's help, we reallocated 36,000 of that so we can better keep up with our expenses for this Music in the Park. That left us with a balance of 191,000, which was requested. We were asked to reduce that to 172,000 for a $19,000 cut. So, and then in the final part of that, that you'll see, I was asked, or I reduced, we were going to do, I wanted to do renovations to the Altbauer tennis court, the same thing I did to Kinderberg Court this past year, which was going to cost $60,000. So that will be cut as well. So we're looking at, out of our proposed budget, 124,000 in reduction. So how is that going to impact recreation? We are looking at 36 part-time and contracted, which is instructional positions, could be eliminated. That's 17 part-time positions and 19 contracted instructional positions that potentially could be eliminated. This also means eliminating programs which results in the loss of employment opportunities for the community. As many of you know, especially during the summer months, we hire a lot of high school students and as well as college students to help run our summer programs and our Kids Club summer program as well. So many of these programs will be affected by that. We've also looked in helping if we're going to make reductions at 12% reduction of summer kids club hours. We're looking at the program hours being reduced from 6 a.m. to 6 p.m. to 7 a.m. to 5:30 p.m. And at this point, we're not sure the effect of the revenue or the participation being unknown. Sandy did do a study though this past year of the effect that it might have. And we feel like there's not a lot of parents during those hours that we would cut. So we could save about $9,000 if we reduce those summer kids hours. We're also looking at an 18% reduction of programs, activities, and community events. What that means is we run 150 total programs during the course of the year. With this 18% reduction, we're looking at cutting out 31 programs that will affect both youth and adult program activities. Some of these proposed eliminated programs are our community enrichment program, which would be, for example, like the Amazing Race, Do You Know Your Parks, Community Bike Challenge, the Great Pumpkin Quest, Snowflake Hunt, and Community Walking Challenge. Also will be eliminated or looking at is youth programs, which includes the elimination of instructors and part-time employees. And I could go through this list, but there's several like Sporties for Shorties, Mad Science, Hot Workshops, youth soccer camps, Learn to Skate, Fun Game Fridays, Kids Triathlon, Surge Little Tykes, Henna, Summer, Fall, Winter, Princess Dance Camp, Dodgeball, Minor League Baseball, Kids Cuisine, and Cake Decorating. Some of the programs that we would look at having to eliminate, the adult programs would be the Co-Rec Volleyball League, Scrapbooking Prop, Women's Rec Volleyball League, and Yoga. And again, this would also cause the elimination of instructional positions as well. So I will ask Sandy to come forward and she can talk a little bit about how this could affect the Kids Club program.
Okay, one thing we talked about is eliminating the Adventure Kids Club supervisor position. We run, Adventure Kids Club is a summer program we run for 5th, 6th, and some 7th graders where they go on a field trip that we don't bring the kindergarten through 4th graders to. So it's a way for the older kids to go on field trips that maybe not be best suited for the younger children, and also for us to have specific programming for the kindergarten through 3rd graders or 4th graders without their older kids there. That position alone will save us $5,500. It'll create more work for me and my program coordinator in the summer, but I think it's still doable. We're gonna reduce our summer staff training by 4 hours a person. Just try to consolidate the training program that we have already for summer staff, which would save us $1,500. We're going to eliminate 3 summer field trips, which would be a savings of $6,800. These were bonus trips that they started this year that I just feel aren't necessary. So we're going to eliminate that. And for a savings of $1,500, we're just going to give our supervisor staff CPR and first aid training. So the total savings for these proposed cuts would be $15,335. Oh, Gil.
Yes, ma'am.
Sorry.
Okay. And then also the proposed elimination changes. We would also have some of the positions that we would eliminate as well is our summer office assistant, which basically this individual is a college student and she runs around all day long. She carries supplies to different sites. She does arts and crafts to prepare for instructional classes. She assists Patty with summer programs. She assists Sandy with the Kids Club program. So for past several years, this has been a valuable position for us during the summer, and typically has been a college student that we've hired to do that. We would reduce field maintenance tech from 5 days to 2 days a week. 2 years ago, because Little League Baseball and Germantown baseball programs, they pay me a fee to use our fields. And they had volunteers that dragged our fields and lined them off. And I came in with your blessing a year ago and spent $60,000 to improve those infields. And I was a little bit picky in that I wanted someone on a daily basis to drag those fields to preserve them. Whereas volunteers, they drag the fields is nice, but they don't always care about how the fields end up and with the investment we made. So this field maintenance technician was trained to drag them appropriately, but we could reduce that from 5 days to 2 days to take care of our own T-ball program that we run at Friedstadt and also at Kinderberg Park. This year I started a farmers market entertainment, try to have an ambiance of performers that played at the farmers market. It was well received, but I could eliminate that. The Family Fun Carnival that we do in conjunction with the Taste of Germantown, we're going to look to try to use volunteers rather than trained staff. Typically, the staff is our Kids Club summer staff that man all the games and the bouncy houses and so forth. And we would also look to eliminate one nighttime T-ball supervisor, leaving us with one to roam the fields. And we're also going to eliminate our awards program. So we're looking at with these reductions and savings of $19,645. Next, I will have Patty talk about our magazine that we publish 3 times a year.
Yes, we have listed in our budget $10,000 for the rec brochure printing and publishing. As you can see, the printing costs would be $4,600, typesetter 13, postage 2,500, and our mailing permit. So for one brochure would be roughly $8,550 to do all of that like we normally do. Normally our budget is like $24,000 for this. So due to it being dropped to 10,000, we will focus on eliminating the mailing costs, doing some printing so that we can at least get it out to schools or have available at the library or the rec department, and to market our brochure online. So those are our cuts for the brochure.
And as I said earlier, I would look to eliminate out of capital improvements, Altbauer tennis courts. If you look in the packet that you can see, we took some pictures of the cracking that has taken place on the courts, almost making them unbearable and unusable. I had a cost estimate to come in and do the same work they did to the Kinderberg courts. So it was approximately $60,000 to get the courts back up to where they should be. But we are looking in trying to save. We'll look at eliminating $60,000 there. I do want to call your attention. I think it's important that you understand from 2022 to 2023 with the budget we've been given. In 2022 for recreation donations, we went up from 31,567 to 46,699. I want you to note that that is just through October of both years. So we still have a quarter left of donations to go. Our park, shelter, and field rentals from 2022 was $30,711. And in 2023 is $45,446, which is a 48% increase. I also like to point out, I apologize, oversight in our recreation donations, the figures I gave you, that is also a 48% increase. So I'm missing one. And then in our recreation fees, this is our biggest revenue generator. As of 2022, at October this time last year, we had generated $759,300.76. As of October this year, we have created $851,998.52, which is a 12.2% increase. So our programs are on the rise, are on the increase each year. We also have developed plans to further increase and generate more revenue with less to work with. We're looking at increasing our farmers market. That program has grown substantially. When I first started here, we had about 15 vendors. Now we're up to 26 vendors that pretty much they meet up here on Saturdays. And so we can increase that revenue by $2,800. The School Year Kids Club, by raising fees on it, we hope to be able to generate an additional $45,465. The Summer Kids Club and Tyke Site, again, generating or looking to increase fees. We hope to be able to generate $36,822. Park shelter rentals. Now, one thing I have to be careful about that, in 2023, I went to the Park Commission and we increased those fees significantly, and that's why you see such a jump. I would look to not make such a rise and increase so that we can continue renting those out, but still looking to generate a couple more $1,000s for next year. Field trips in the summer, we are looking at raising the fees for the field trips, and we could generate $55,488. And then the community garden, which is also growing, an additional $600 to $1,000. So just with fee increases alone for next year, we're looking at raising an additional $165,175. So, any questions?
Trustee Nyrider.
Gil, and first of all, credit to you and your staff for going through your budget and making adjustments and whatever. I don't know if personally yet, if I feel all of those are going to be needed. I look at parks and library budgets because I feel they directly affect people, the users. The question I have for you is on Altbauer, the tennis courts.
Yes.
I looked at those two on, it was Sunday or whatever, Sunday or Monday. How long has it been since something's been done there?
I believe, because when I had the contractor come out and looked at them, I believe he said the last time they worked on them was approximately 6 or 7 years ago.
Okay. And what is the life, if we don't do anything in 2024, what is the life expectancy yet then of those courts before they won't be usable?
Well, with the weather, the drastic weather that we have, the winters and so forth exposed, what it's going to do is the cracks that you see there are going to continue to expand. And at some point, you're not going to be able to play on them. I would say within another year, at the rate that they're going now, they're going to be pretty unusable.
Is the 60,000 basically a resurfacing or?
Yes, they would go in and put down some materials to close the cracks, and then they would repaint the surface and reline it.
Do we have any signs up? I didn't see any, but any signs or whatever cautioning people to use these courts? Are we getting at a liability issue here that our insurance company might say, hey, these are dangers for people to use?
Right. At this point, the cracks aren't, I don't think they're a liability for as far as tripping or whatever. I think at some point it'll have more of an effect on the way the ball bounces. When you start hitting those cracks, it moves the direction of the ball. And
so it might be the year I beat my wife playing tennis finally.
Right.
No, just kidding. Okay, thank you.
If I can make an addition as well, the outballer tennis courts were originally requested in the general fund. If the board so chooses, they could fund that through the capital fund or through ARPA funds as well, if they wish to include that in the 2024 recommended budget.
Are they heavily used for tennis? I mean, do we run lessons or programs out there for tennis? Would it make more sense to convert any part of that to a pickleball court?
Yes, sir. And I have looked into that. That would, in actuality, that's down the road, my future plan. But I just thought it'd be easier to get them resurfaced and then you can convert them into pickleball.
Okay, but when they reline for tennis, it would be a different relining for the
Yes, sir.
pickleball. Okay,
You could get 2 pickleball courts on 1 tennis court.
right. Okay. There seems to be more of a need for that lately, even
Yes,
with the
sir.
ones that
Pickle-
we have. They're very full, and the people that play them and that talk to me say that we really should have twice as many as we have now.
We should. Pickleball, not only in Germantown, but throughout the United States is probably the fastest growing sport. And it used to be only for 50 and over, and now the younger generation or younger folks are.
Pointing to you.
Yeah, sorry about that. But yes, it is a growing sport and should be looked at.
Okay, good. Other questions? Trustee Hudson?
So Gil, I know that the school district continues to raise their fees in what I would consider to be a dramatic fashion, but that's my use of that adjective. And I know that one of the things that they have increased very rapidly is actually the fee that they charge the rec department for using the tennis courts at the high school, right?
Yes, sir. That's probably our biggest fee. Patty, you can.
With the new agreement, they took out the wording about the tennis courts, so now we're paying for the tennis courts. So
Correct.
this summer we paid around $7,500 for just summer use. So that's something else we're looking at, like trying to move the afternoon lessons for teams to Kinderberg.
So my question is if we start to maintain our tennis courts and our parks a little bit better, right? So you can make up $60,000 pretty quickly if the expense is $7,500 a year. It's about 8. So do we have the capacity at our tennis courts, and are they of the quality to be able to start saving money that way?
Obviously, Elbauer is
Well-
rough. There's 4 courts at Kinderberg. It's just, right now we have lessons on Monday, Wednesday nights, and We usually use 8 courts for that, to try to maximize our staffing at the same location, at the same times, but
Do we have that many decent courts in our parks or no?
no, we have 4 at Kinderberg to use.
Well, we have 4 at Kinderberg, and then we do have the ones at Sposland, which are in good condition.
Yeah,
So
I
that
was-
gives us approximately 6. And if we repair the ones at Altbauer, that would give us 9.
And then I do have a question. Actually, are we starting to take down the tennis nets at this point in time or?
Yes, sir.
Yeah.
Yes. As a matter of fact, DPW started doing that yesterday. Now, I did instruct or ask them to leave one up at each area while the weather is still like this, because we do still get a demand. And the pickleball court nets are still up as well.
And then the other line of questioning that I have is with these cuts that we're looking at, how many of our Germantown families are going to be affected?
We based it off registrations because we just really didn't know how else to account for that. So 2,386. As
Different users would be affected. And then with the hourly changes on Kids Club, right? So do we know the number of families that are going to be affected by being unable to drop their children off or pick them up when they need to?
So I took a look at it in 15-minute increases, and the 7 o'clock change will have a 3% impact at one of our sites from 6:45 to 7. So it's hard to say. I mean, does that mean they're not going to use our program because they need to drop their kids off at 6:45, or will they still use it at 7? So that's unknown. And the other side I looked at, it had a very minimal impact in the morning, and then changing in the afternoon has a minimal impact as well. Like maybe 2% of registrations were affected by it. So we don't know if we're going to lose 2% of registrants or not. It's hard to say, but I think the savings actually would be worth it to make these cuts either way. It's going to eliminate a lot of overtime that we have with our supervisor staff. And $9,000 was probably a conservative estimate. We'll probably save even more than that.
Okay, thank you. And then so for those, if I think I understand what you're saying, many of the people that we would no longer be doing business with are contracted instructors.
A lot of it is contracted instructors. Patty could probably speak to that better.
And so are those programs profitable? So I'm probably not,
most programs cover their direct costs. It's the indirect costs that is kind of a mystery to us of how much we're supposed to actually cover and how we do that. So most of them, yes, are probably at the ones that we're looking at cutting would be maybe at 108% supporting or 110. So yes, they cover their direct costs, but it's the indirect costs that we're seemingly to be tasked with trying to cover more of those. So that's the crux of the situation.
and then my last question is for Matthew, please. So Matthew, how close to covering the costs of the rec department are we?
If we take into account all of the facility rentals and things such as that, are probably around, budgeted wise, we're probably around 95%. The last couple of years, we've been closer to 70% based on actuals.
So when you
changes. of cost changes. It's dropped.
So we've gone from,
Understand the question.
so Matthew, I
Yep.
want to understand what you're saying correctly.
Yep.
At one point in time, the rec department was covering 95% of the
No,
costs by revenue, and now we're down to 75%?
no, perhaps I misspoke. So I did a little analysis based on, what the rec department was budgeted to cover, which historically, if you include facility rentals, was around 85%. The last couple of years, and really post-COVID, they've been closer to 70% actuals. Still budgeted around 85%. The 2023 budget was around, they were budgeted to cover around 90% of their costs. Then with the 2024 budget, based on these changes, it's probably closer to 95% of their costs.
And did they cover 90% of their cost in 2023 so far, Matthew?
No, they are not on pace to cover 90% of their costs.
Where's the disconnect?
I would say the raise in rates was
Yeah,
of facility.
based on looking at the actuals, and
That's
kind
the
of comparing
question.
some of the to other communities, my recommendation and based on looking at it is we're just not covering or gaining enough revenue. Based on the program.
Obviously. I mean, obviously, yeah.
Right.
Yeah, but when you look at the budget, are the cost overruns in specific areas is my question?
I don't have the program by program expenses. I see the overall expenses for the program supplies and those are over. But I don't have it based program by program on which programs are.
But you can't tell if it's salaries or insurance or crayons or.
Not to that level of detail. Part-time salaries are over. And that's mostly, and someone can correct me if I'm wrong, it's mostly for Kids Club.
Okay.
It's a very successful program.
And have we seen a positive trend since the end of COVID, or have we seen no trend at all?
Let me pull this up real quick.
That's my last question.
And is your question the trend in revenue increases? I'm sorry, what specific trend?
Are we seeing a positive trend since the end of COVID? Are people coming, are we gaining more users and revenue in our rec department, or is it staying flat since the end of the pandemic?
Based on users, I would have to pass that along. I'm not
Based
sure.
on revenue, Matthew.
Revenue? Revenues is slightly increased, the last year or two. 2021, I'm going to throw out 2020. 2021, it was quite low. The last 2 years, we have seen slight increases, but I don't know if that's based on more users or increased fees.
I can add to what you were asking about why our wages were higher this year. So this summer, we increased our enrollment rate by 14%, which also increased our revenue by 24%. So we added $44,700 in wages to make $67,000 in revenue. The problem with summer is it wasn't priced properly. We basically broke even. We did not make a profit at all. So we have a plan in place to make summer profitable for the village, so that if we are spending $300,000 of the village's money, that we can profit from it to cover some of the indirect costs that we're currently not covering. So in the past, 2 years ago, they charged $6 for field trips. And then this year they took the field trip fee away. So they raised the Kids Club fee by $5 a day, but they eliminated the $6 field trip fee. So it was basically a wash. So the plan is to take the field trip fee and divide it by the number of participants, and we came up with a $12 fee. So that way everyone is covering the cost of their children's field trips. Because another thing we see is we get a lot higher attendance on field trip days. So you have people that are using the program maybe just on field trip days, and they're actually dragging the revenues down because those days are obviously more expensive for us. So I think next year, I estimate if we put these changes in place, that Summer Kids Club, if registration stays the same, should make about $101,000 in the summer, compared to nothing right now.
For individual instructional classes and our youth sports, we are going to obviously raise all of our fees, but we set a goal that if a program doesn't make 20% profit over the fee, over the expenses, then it'll be a program that will drop. So we're setting a goal of generating at least 20%, a minimal, hopefully more, but a minimal of 20%. And so the 30 some odd programs that we're looking to drop, we're below that 20%. So we're streamlining a little bit so we can, but still looking forward to generating more. I didn't talk about it much and only answer questions, but hopefully all of you got a sponsorship packet that we sent out. It's our goal to generate a whole lot more sponsorships this year, and we have a plan in place. We've already set it in motion, sending out packets to so far around 100 businesses, and we have 400 businesses altogether that we plan to hit up and at some point follow up with phone calls, visits, whatever it's going to take to generate those corporate sponsorships or little business sponsorships. So we hope to see an increase in sponsorships as well.
Trustee Jan Miller.
Just a couple questions on the, going back to the Altbauer tennis courts. The tennis courts, if I heard you correctly, we have 2 and then 3 and then 4 at Kinderberg. We have 9 courts, tennis courts.
That's correct, right? Yes.
And then how many do they have at the high school? 8. Oh, okay. So it's, so you gather everybody at the same place and yeah, logistically,
Right.
it's a
we
lot
have one
better.
Tennis director, so that's the issue is
Right.
he oversees everything and if we
You maximize. Yeah.
we're gonna have trouble with that, so.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think that perhaps there could be some negotiation maybe next year for, tennis courts if you don't move it. I hate to see programs cut, and it is a service, and you're giving a lot of knowledge and play and fun for the residents of Germantown. So, are you having you use volunteers as well?
Oh, yes. Most of our special events, that's mostly what we use is.
Okay.
And again, we're looking to try to cut down costs with our, when we work with Germantown, the carnivals that we do there, typically that's cost expensive, very expensive because we use our summer staff for that. But we've reached out and hopefully we'll be able to get some volunteers to help us man the booths, which will bring our costs down considerably.
Mm-hmm. And I think that since we have public parks, that we should really take care of the tennis courts and make it safe for our residents. It's just what I think. I mean, we're trying to be a healthy, open community, so I think it's worthwhile doing that. Also, yes, the return on the investment, you have to be very careful about how you price the facilities to rent. So if you raised them last year, you might want to hold that. If you're raising everything else, maybe it's too much of a shock. And especially if your rentals went down. So that would be something I would make sure you take a look at. Because you do want to rent the space, I would think.
We do. And actually, our rentals went up this year, but
Even
like
with
it-
the price increase?
even with the price increase.
Okay.
But again, I would caution if I do go for a price, it would be a minimal one
Yeah,
because of the large one we asked for last year.
right, right. So and I like to echo what Trustee Nyrather said. Kudos to you and your staff for heads up and the incident we had yesterday at the school. One of your staff is my neighbor, and that I didn't know that she was involved in that. So along with our police, fire, and all of our, public safety people that were there. So, and dispatchers, right? So, I would like to see our equipment at Altbauer fixed. It is popular. We do need extra pickleball courts. Like, I don't know how many we have, 2, 4, just a very small amount. So, however we can accomplish that, I think we should.
Thank you. Yes.
So, rule of thumb has always been for any rec department program, it can't lose money, correct? It was always been structured, so whatever fees that you're paying, whatever increase in fees that are being passed along from the schools for use of their facilities gets pretty much passed into the program and the participants are paying for those increases. So you said something that I don't know if everybody caught, but you said a lot of the programs that you looked at removing were the ones that were in that lower value, correct? That
That is
weren't
correct,
making
yes.
or covering themselves. So you did an analysis of all your programs and said, we're going to be removing these because of their cost value isn't as high as other programs in their participation or in their revenue streams.
That is correct. Yes.
Okay, because that's how I remember the rule of thumb to be as well. Yeah, I'm not looking to, if we can find a way to redo the all powers courts from, I don't know, moving ARPA funds or whatever, I'd be open to looking at that. We all know that if we ignore those, the longer we ignore it, the costlier it becomes to repair those. But I think there's also a way that we could use dual use of those courts now, knowing that there's more activity on one side than the other, even though it would give the opportunity for both. So if we're going to be putting that kind of investment into a court, I would look for it to be a dual use so that it gets maximum ability for the most residents to use based on that cost to repair.
And Sposland Park that is both tennis and pickleball, the usage of it is become a large overflow for Hop Strauss because Hop Strauss is just, it's hard to get on a court. And we created rules to try to get everyone on there, but a lot of people are now going over to Hop because you can play pickleball or tennis there. So the usage there. So yeah, I think a dual usage at Altbauer would increase participation as well.
Okay. Other questions in recreation? Do we know what overall percentage of increase we have received from the school district for facilities? Was it 7% is that what I heard, or is that just for the tennis courts? Ballpark, it doesn't.
Oh. Do you mean like in general, just like the regular like gyms and everything only went up $1, and then we have a fee parity in our contract so that when club teams they get a cheaper price. If there's a similar program that we have, we pay that same price. Those club team fees doubled. So for instance, basketball, paying a double that I did, it went from $4 an hour to $8. And on a regular day, I pay 12 without the fee period.
Okay.
Does that make sense?
Yes, thank you. Other questions? If there's none other for recreation, we can go to senior center.
Not many changes to the senior center budget. The largest expense here are salaries and wages for the staff that run that center.
Thank you.
On the operating supplies and expense side, one of the big hitters is the senior trips expense, where they do a couple trips a year to various locations in Wisconsin. So no major changes in the senior center budget.
Questions? Any changes to the building is all under a different budget, buildings and grounds.
Correct.
No questions? Okay, data processing.
In front of you, thank you. In front of you is the data
Thank you, Gil.
processing 2024 recommended budget. You will see an increase in this budget. Part of that reason is kind of to make things easier for the village board and for residents is to understand what we pay for, internet, copiers, the telephones. Historically, that's all been charged to one spot, and then at the end of the year, allocated out amongst the departments. Here, what we try to do is allocate that all to one line item. So each year you can see, what we're paying for internet, telephone, and things such as that. So that's why you see a slight increase in operating supplies and expenses. In addition, some of the heavy hitters in this budget is Tyler Munis. The overall contract's about $125,000. Half of that is paid through the general fund, 25%. Either 25 or 30%, I don't recall the total splits, is paid between water and sewer. In addition, capital data, a good chunk of that is paid through the general fund, and a portion of that then is allocated out to water and sewer, depending on if they have any projects specific to them. In addition, just to support our emails is $37,000.
So you took those costs and put them under one umbrella and removed them from all the other departments, or?
So if you look at most departments, copier expenses, telephone expenses, there wasn't an internet line, but internet, those are removed from individual departments' budgets and reallocated back into data processing.
Okay.
I don't know if I like that.
Do you want to expand or just leave it at that?
Yeah, I think it's hard to keep track of costs of which department is using how much of one resource, such as phones, such as internet, such as copy machines. And I think the departments should be responsible for that. Say a department is using way too much paper and copy machines and toner and yada yada, then they should be responsible for it. I don't like it that it's all put in one account.
Okay. Other comments or questions for data processing?
Can I make a motion to separate it again?
If you want to, yes, you can make a motion.
Yeah, I'd like to make a motion to separate it into the individual departments again, like how it was.
That's your motion?
Yeah,
So your motion is to take it as it's all been put into one general area and separate it back out into individual departments per cost based on use?
correct.
Okay. Motion made. Do we have a second? One more time. Motion made. Do we have a second? Motion fails for lack of a second. Other questions for data processing? Trustee Jan Miller.
Do we have contracts for each individual thing? So there was capital data, there was copiers.
Yes, we do. And the thing with most of those contracts is the only one that separates it into individual departments' usage is the copiers, and that's just because the copiers are located in different departments, but it doesn't have it separated out until like we have one by the clerk's office, but it doesn't separate out the clerk's usage, the finance usage. We could do that, but only for copiers. We can't do that for like our telephone contracts and
Or
things like
internet.
that. So, and the internet. And so, capital data also right now, we don't have that separated out. We have things separated out between the police department and our department, but that's just per location. So
Are there logons for the copiers?
Or,
There are, and that's why I'm saying we could do that, but currently we don't do that. It's just separated out by the copier contracts
Okay.
per copier.
So there's copier contract, there's a, what about email for $37,000? Why is email $37,000? I don't understand.
Because within each email account, then you also have, certain email accounts have access to like the Microsoft products and things like that. So that's all encapsulated in that cost. So,
Okay, so it's the-
and I analyze those quite often to make sure that, we're making, that's why, as you saw, your access as trustees was changed, just because I didn't think that, the Microsoft products needed to be on there. So I constantly analyze, which groups are getting what licenses through those contracts. But it has gone up because, as you recall, when it was when our license was here, we didn't actually have licenses for each individual user, so we weren't paying those costs.
Right.
Now we're paying those costs and we're getting
Okay.
those protections added.
Right, and we need protection.
Yes, yes.
All right. So that's, and why is the Tyler Munis $64,000? I thought we paid,
So the total cost of the contract
Right.
is about $125,000.
that's what I mean.
50% of that is allocated to the general fund, and then the rest is split between water and sewer for their portion of the software. We have a utility
Oh.
billing module, which
Sure.
is a good chunk of that.
Okay.
And then on
So
the
this-
finance side.
so
So
this-
this split, correct.
So this is the village, not
This
the
is- yep, this is
utility.
The general funds portion of that contract.
Okay. And what, and on the ledger, you still have the telephone separate, right? Or did you lump it? I mean, this is a,
So a majority of the telephone, not to get too much in the weeds, the telephones that you call Village Hall or the
Yeah.
library, those have
Yes.
been consolidated. If an individual has a cell phone, like a work cell phone, that is still allocated out to that department, just because it's easy to track those and it's
Okay.
no extra effort to allocate.
so the landlines are all in one
Correct.
area and then the cell phones go to each individual
Correct.
business department. Okay. Those were my questions. And what is the total increase then?
65,000?
37,000. And these, yeah, yeah,
And remember, a majority of that increase is, it's just taking it from different departments. So
okay.
it's
and
really not,
bundling it.
yeah, it's really not an
Okay.
increase in the budget, more or less an increase in the data processing area.
Okay.
Because all of those costs for internet and telephone services and things like that are coming out of the other budgets.
Okay. Thank you.
Trustee Peeper?
Yeah, a couple questions. The copier machine, the budget that went from 500 to 12,000, what other departments did you consolidate in the budget?
For the copiers, we just consolidated the ones that were affected by the copier contract. So like the police department wasn't affected because they have their own copier contract. But we had the copy machine from the senior center and then our copiers in Village Hall. So just those departments, the finance department, community development, engineering, park and rec, I'm sorry,
So
now I'm
what-
forgetting which ones I
What
did, I already said.
was budgeted for the $500 for 2023?
I'm sorry, what 500 are you referring to?
Copy machine line item for 2023, the budget was $500. Year to
Oh,
date is
in data
zero.
processing, we
Yes.
allocated that out
Sorry.
based on the copier contracts. We allocated out the contract to all departments and data processing department, even though, no one actually works in that department, we still do work with that department. Their allocation was $500.
But they didn't use any of it for 2023 so far?
So what happens is that we need to allocate out those copier costs at the end of the year.
So how many departments went into the $12,000 increase?
It was village board, administrator, clerk's office, treasurer's office.
When you say village board, does that mean the agendas that you print out for our meetings or what? Because
I don't
print
believe
out
those.
everything at my own cost.
Yeah, I don't believe those are charged to village board. You know, some trustees enjoy paper copies. So when we make paper copies for trustees, we typically charge them to village board.
Like the budgets.
Okay,
For example, the budget.
sure,
Yeah.
I get that. But so village board, what other departments added to the $12,000?
So as village board, administrator, clerk's office, treasurer's office. Keep scrolling down. It'd be community development, recreation,
Public work.
engineering, inspection services. And I believe that is it.
Okay, so looking at the library's budget for telephone, it shows 0% difference. And we actually budgeted $4,000 for 2024. But if we budgeted $4,000 for 2024 for the library's telephone, why is the budget for data processing increasing 800%?
For the library? Or
Well, you said we consolidated the phone.
yeah, most departments had their phones consolidated, not all departments. Library,
Well, you guys said that the library consolidated the phone into it.
they should have there, so that is an area where we could decrease it.
So the library actually has an additional $4,000 in their budget right now?
That is one that could be reallocated, yes.
But numbers have to balance. And if this is a balanced budget, then where's the difference?
There's an additional $4,000 available, right?
Yeah, but I'm saying, like, if this is a balanced budget, so I went to school for accounting. I have my bachelor's in accounting and I understand balance sheets. And if this is a balanced budget and we have an 838% increase for data processing for the telephone, but you guys said it was because we were consolidating the telephone bill for everybody. And now I see that and including the library, but the library still budgeted 4,000. So what other departments?
Correct. So that should be 0 for the library.
But then it throws off the whole entire balanced budget by $4,000.
Agreed.
So if it's a balanced budget,
I agree that it's no longer balanced. It's balanced and there's an additional $4,000 that can be reallocated.
so you're saying that all the books that you provided, the spreadsheets, they were not actually balanced.
Nope. The spreadsheets are balanced. The budget is balanced. That $4,000 should have been 0. So if we zero it out, there's an additional $4,000 that the village board can reallocate somewhere else.
So what other departments consolidated the telephone?
The only other one that may not have been looked at, I'm not sure. I didn't look at the senior center, but if there was a cost for the senior center telephones, then that could come out as well.
I would check that just to make sure.
Yeah, so the telephone went up 838%. So what departments consolidated?
But
into
just,
the
so you know, there
telephone?
was a part in the telephone for I'm sure it's not 4,000, but for the library, there should have been some telephone expenditures in there for their cell phone, because they do have one cell phone over there. And then for the senior center, I'm not sure if they have.
Cell
any
phone's a
cell phones,
different
but-
line item.
But they may have been under the telephone line item. Or
Well,
they
then why-
should have been
line
for
item.
the library. So I'm just saying that that may have been there. It's not going to be $4,000, but that should have remained within the library. Same with the fire department. So the fire department has a telephone line item and there will be costs there, but that's for the cell phones and not for the landlines.
So I guess I'm still confused. What other departments were consolidated under data processing for telephone besides the library? So fire department?
It would have been everybody except the police department.
So fire department, library. What else?
Everybody.
Senior center?
Senior center, everybody at Village Hall. So all of those departments would have been consolidated into for the landline telephones. Now,
Okay.
many of those departments still do have cell phones that would have remained in their department line item budget. It might, I'm not sure because I don't put together the senior center budget. I'm so sorry.
So fire should show a negative for their telephone, correct?
Fire? No, because they have a lot of cell phones.
But if they're not paying for a landline anymore out of their budget.
That would be only the landline would come out of their budget. So in years past for each department, it was like a percentage. There was a chart put together where it was just a percentage taken out. It's not like we went through the telephone bill and made sure, to.
Okay, well then help
subdivide
me
each.
out. Where's this increase coming from?
I'm sorry, what increase?
The 838% increase for data processing for telephone.
Because it's all coming from all the other departments into this one.
Well, I'm looking through all the other departments' budgets and I'm not seeing it. So
Yeah, because in reality, changing our landlines is decreasing the cost for the village, not increasing the cost.
we're
Right
taking
now,
it some departments' budgets and putting it into the data processing. So we should see that in the other departments that we're taking it out of,
correct.
but I'm not seeing that.
Simply get a tabulation.
Yes.
I'm sorry to hear that.
I asked if we can just get a tabulation of the phone bills as to what each department is. Here's your phone, here's the decrease, here's the total number. Just get one summary of the whole thing and then we'll share it with each
Yeah.
other.
I'd appreciate that, and I'll look into it later. Absolutely. Thank you, Trustee Baum.
Sure.
Anything else for data processing?
And just to add, the majority of the telephone decrease is in the treasurer's department. Historically, we had budgeted 3,600 there. Into 2024 budget, there's 0 budgeted there. So that's a large portion of the telephones.
Anything else data processing? If not, we go to item N, clerk.
Here you'll see a rather large change compared to the 2023 recommended budget. Before my time, I believe around 2020, the village board decided to combine the clerk and finance departments into a clerk treasurer's department. Since then, historically, all the salaries and benefits outside of election workers and election supplies had been budgeted in the clerk or in the finance treasurer's budget. With the splitting of the departments, we reallocated many of those expenses back to the clerk's department. Well, I'll start with operating supplies and expenses. The largest expenses there are for the elections in 2024. There's expected to be 4 elections, including a presidential election. So we see a rather large increase there on the operating supplies and expense side. On the salaries and wages side, the part-time election workers are projected to go up by about $45,000. This was based on the 2020 and 2016 elections. This might be a little high compared to those elections, but we're expecting a high turnout for the presidential election, and we're playing that one a little safe. On the regular salaries, what you'll see there is salaries for a full-time clerk and 2 full-time deputy clerks. Same with the benefits. And so that is why you see a rather large increase compared to the 2023 budget there.
Questions? No questions? Village Board,
Not much has changed for the village board's recommended budget. Legal services make up a large chunk of that, and that budget amount has remained the same for the last several years.
any questions? No questions? Administration,
You'll see some slight changes to the village administrator's budget, more specifically the elimination of the budget manager position. That is why you'll see a salary decrease and fringe benefit decrease in the village administrator's budget. The portion that was allocated to that budget is no longer needed. On the operating supplies and expense side, there's typically 10 or 11,000 budgeted for wellness expense. We've decided to move that into the health fund. So the health fund will cover that cost and save the general fund about $10,000.
any questions? Trustee Jan Miller,
On the salaries and wages, it's going down almost 29,000. Can you explain why?
Yep. So historically, the budget manager's position was allocated, a portion of that was allocated to the administrator's budget. With the splitting of the clerk finance departments, that position was eliminated.
So only 29,000 came out of there?
Correct. Only a portion of the overall salaries was allocated to the village administrator budget.
So so are you saying that the 2023 budget was 2 people, basically partially the budget manager and the village administrator?
It would have been 3 positions. Partially, it would have been the village administrator, the support services manager, and the budget manager.
So now the other portion of the village administrator and support services is not in administration anymore, or?
That same portion is the same as it has historically been, but
You just took out the portion?
just the portion for the budget manager.
Okay, so you're saying all of village administrator is 2 positions?
Correct. 2 partial positions because their salaries are allocated.
Partial.
Yep.
The other
Allocated out to
is
the other
supported
funds.
by a TID?
The village administrator is spread out between the general fund, the 4 active TIDs, the water utility, and the sewer utility.
Is that the same for the support manager then?
The support services manager, I do not believe is allocated to any of the TIDs. I can take a look real quick though. The support service manager is allocated between the general fund, water utility, and sewer utility.
Okay.
any other questions for administration? Finance,
Much like the administrator's budget, you'll see a decrease in salaries and fringe benefits. Historically, the clerk and the deputy clerks had been allocated to this budget. With the splitting of the departments, those allocations got split back to the clerk. Operating supplies and expenses, you'll see are cut almost in half. We reallocated, some of the expenses that were allocated to the finance department over to the clerk's department, so they could buy some paper and things like that without having to ask finance to cover it for them. On the revenue side, there was an increase in state aid, as you are all aware, of $497,994. You'll see that in the intergovernmental revenues increase. At the same time, there's a slight decrease in the personal property aid exemption of about $50,000. Overall, revenues for the finance department, and not as a result of the finance department, is about $3 million.
Questions?
Am I supposed to have a different tab in my binder for finance?
Is it?
It should be under, if you're looking at the 2024 recommended budget dash major funds sheet, finance department should be in there. It actually might be titled treasurer / accounting. That is my mistake.
That's what it is. Treasurer / accounting. Line 99.
That's not what he said too.
I'm sorry. So I'm looking at treasurer / accounting.
This is what we got. This is the budget that we got.
And where's finance?
Treasurer / accounting is finance.
Oh, okay. Gotcha.
Yep.
Questions? No questions? Assessor.
Not much has changed on the assessor's recommended budget. The largest expense there is the contract we have with Associate Appraisals. And there's 2 years remaining on that contract.
Is there a reassessment within that 2 years?
So that'd be a separate cost. And once we get to the ARPA budget, that is something we are recommending once again, as well as the assessor has recommended that the last 2 years that the village consider an interim market update.
Okay. Questions? Trustee Jan Miller.
I thought the contract, the assessor contract, it's a 3-year contract. This will be the second year of the contract, correct?
I believe it's a longer contract than that. I thought, I can go back and look at some communications with Mark. I believe it's a longer contract than 3 years.
I thought it was 80-some thousand. Just ask, that was.
I think it's roughly 85,000 a year.
So do you have the contract in the operating supplies and expenses?
Yep. So if you look at the assessor's budget under contracted services, you'll see we budgeted $87,000.
Oh, okay. I'm just looking at your. Yeah. Okay. I'm looking at your PowerPoint. It's different than your.
I should have highlighted that a little better.
Questions? General government.
General government is where we house our pay adjustment. For the 2024 recommended budget, we assumed a performance adjustment of 3%, and there was a 4% adjustment for the DPW union.
Questions? Trustee Jan Miller.
Does this include all of the salary adjustments, even the, you've got performance adjustment for 3%?
Correct.
But we gave salary adjustments to get people into the mid-range or low range.
Correct, and those will show up in each individual's budget as that happened in 2023. So it's built into the base for 2024.
Okay, thank you.
Anything else for general government? Capital fund.
In front of you is the 2024 capital fund. I decided to show it as a summary. I believe it's easier to do a list of the projects and their cost. The first column, well, I shouldn't say that. The column titled borrowing is what would be new borrowing, and then the next column would be rollover funds. In the 2024 capital fund, we're estimating about $3.1 million for capital projects.
If we have a deficit, why are we borrowing for capital fund?
So these are separate funds. So the capital fund is supported by the debt service fund. So it's not related to the general fund or surpluses or deficits within the general fund.
So it's in the, I'm sorry, debt service fund?
So we have two funds that are kind of interlinked. The capital fund is where we budget those projects, asphalt road paving, things such as that nature. Then once we get the bill for the debt that we borrowed, we pay that through the debt service fund. So as you borrow in the capital fund, you pay for it in the debt service fund. So if you recall, the 2024 debt service budget went down because we didn't borrow for anything in the capital fund this year. So what you do in the debt service fund, or what you do in the capital fund, won't affect next year's debt service, but the following year's debt service.
So, why would we create more debt? Do all of these projects need to be done?
Yeah, I would defer that to the village board. Need is subjective. It's really a priority list for the village board to decide if these projects are worth funding.
These are the asks of each of the departments for new equipment and or services.
They are asks.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, and we decide which ones
Right.
that we want to borrow for and which ones we didn't. Last year, we didn't borrow anything because we took it out of the reserves, about 3 million, about the same amount
Yeah,
roughly.
historically, we have budgeted roughly 3.5 million, depending on the year and the size of the projects. This year, it's on the lower end than what we historically have done.
And at the time when it was on the higher end, the amount to borrow was at a lower percentage than it is today. So the argument was always borrow more at lesser cost to
Right.
cover more equipment. And now it doesn't apply as directive because of the increase in the percentage to borrow.
Yes, I agree. It's more costly to borrow this year.
Anything else, Trustee Jan Miller?
I'll pass it along.
Hey, Trustee Kaminsky.
This is something we don't have to decide tonight. If you remember, Jan, it's like usually February is when this comes up and we can pick through it and we could talk to the departments again and say, what would happen if we didn't do a plow truck this year? Because the borrowing doesn't take place until first quarter of next year.
I see.
So this is, so we can digest this now and
Yeah.
kind of,
You can make changes if you
you
want.
can, if you want to take the time, but I'm just saying, normally we're going to make changes right up until, potentially, we can make changes up until March 1st or whatever.
Because you'll start to trade some of that off with whatever you're remaining with the ARPA. Hmm? Anything, other questions about capital fund? Trustee Paul?
I'm not a computer guy. What are switches and access points for $85,000 under data processing? Line 3.
Trustee Pieper?
I'm sorry. I didn't have my mic on. What is switches and access points for $85,000 on line 4 of data processing?
So this is to update the equipment in our back rooms. Switches are the ones that power that your computers go to, and it kind of directs the flow and everything like that. Ours are not supported and pretty old, so we have had Capital Data look at a bunch of them and evaluate which ones need to be replaced. Access points are the ones that you put around a building for your Wi-Fi. So those have to be replaced as well. The ones we have are really old and not supported. And so Capital Data has gone through our buildings and given us an estimate of how much it would be to replace those.
Okay, thank you. And then this is borrowing for a 10-year note?
Usually.
Correct.
Okay, I'm looking specifically at an ambulance replacement and a water tender replacement. Those would generally last longer. Would we borrow longer for those?
Historically, it has been, the decision of the village board to use 10-year notes, rather than 20-year bonds.
Okay, and then, but the Public Works building,
That was a 20-year bond.
that's a 20-year bond.
The water tender is a carryover.
Yeah, didn't we order that already?
Yes.
Yeah, I'm just trying to understand what the duration was for borrowing those things. Just trying to get it straight in my head. Okay, that's all I have. Thank you.
Other questions?
I did. Can I see a breakdown of the switching and access points?
You shouldn't sit down, Aaron.
Shouldn't sit in the back row.
Yes, Julian, I can give that to you. It was brought before the board earlier because we've had this quote for a while. I don't have an updated quote, but I can give you the current quote we have.
Yeah, if you could give me anything, either the outdated quote, and when you get it, the updated quote, please.
Aaron, while you're up there, the switches and the access points, were those the items that they had, Capital Data had problems accessing? I mean, there was a shortage, remember? Maybe Rick remembers, there was a shortage of some sort of piece of equipment.
I don't mean to interrupt, Trustee Jan, but that was the servers.
That was the servers? Okay,
Yeah,
thanks.
that caused the data loss. Is that what you mean?
Yes,
Yeah, those were the servers,
Did
which
we
we
ever
did
get
get
those?
replaced. Yes.
thank you. Did we ever get those replaced? Or
Yes,
updated?
those were part of the ProPhoenix
Okay.
project. So, and that project has been complete.
And then we have 172,000 for rollover Tyler Munis.
Yep, and I should note that most of these are projected rollovers. We'll have a final amount at the end of the year once we close out some of these projects. The Tyler Munis project, the financials we went live with in October, and we're scheduled to go live with some of the HR in the first quarter of next year. HR payroll is the outstanding task. We do have a community development portion of the Munis project that we'll have to tackle at some point, but we haven't quite started that yet.
Community development.
Mostly permit licensing and things such as that. They have a module where people can
Oh, they
apply
do.
for permits online and different charge codes and things like that. That we did include when we signed that contract with Munis. We haven't quite started that portion of the project yet, so that will still be outstanding in 2024.
And the complete financial reporting, is that going to be completed at the end of this year? Or it's supposed to be completed now, October?
The 2022 audit. Are we,
You mean, so
Yes,
implementation of,
that as well.
Tyler Munis.
Speaking for Tyler Munis, financials are completed. The only thing that's outstanding that doesn't affect our use of the system is just getting in some 2021 and 2022 data. It's just so we have that historicals in the system. It's not quite finished yet, but we're fully up and running with Munis. As it relates to 22 audit, a small update. We're just waiting. We had sent over some of our capital stuff to Baker Tilly a couple weeks ago, and they're just working through that and coming back with questions. And we're just going back and forth, getting some of the final information regarding the capital projects from 2022 as it relates to the village. So that's what's still outstanding.
Did they give you a timeline?
They did not. I can reach out to Leah and I can provide that tomorrow.
That would be great.
You're welcome.
I have a problem with spending 1.5 million on road paving because I believe there's some monies in, not that we don't need roads done, the ARPA funds, and I'm just making a statement, and ARPA funds, and we get 1.2 million for transportation. So I'm just saying, if we don't have to borrow it, let's use what we have. Use the monies that we have allocated already or rolled over. Thank you.
Other questions? Trustee Hudson?
I would just ask that when we think about road spending, that we're probably going to have a $5 to $6 million project on Division Road. And we have to figure out a way how we are going to pay for that. So we need to be very mindful about what we're going to do with our road funding, because that's going to be a monster project that needs to get done within the next couple of years.
Trustee Jan Miller.
Perhaps now that we're beefing up our DPW staff, we might have some creative solutions rather than spending 4 to 5 million and get something to make it plausible and because I don't think we're going to save $5 million in 2 years. So perhaps that's an avenue we can look at.
Anything else for capital? ARPA funds.
Before you is an updated ARPA, the updated ARPA numbers as relates to kind of the buckets that the village board had created back in 2021. What funds have been spent in fiscal year 22, what funds have been spent in fiscal year 23, and the remaining funds of the ARPA allocation that we received from the federal government. We're projecting about 1.3 million still remaining in 2024 with a couple projects still outstanding. With that being said, there are a couple recommended projects that staff has decided to bring forth to the village board for consideration. If you notice, there is about $500,000 allocated for buildings. Based on conversations with the village administrator and staff, if the village board decided to go with a new police building, that the design for that would cost roughly $500,000 and that we could use ARPA funds for that project. In addition, the assessor has recommended the last 2 budget cycles that we do an interim market update. That would cost about $65,000. If the village board does not decide to do that by 2020, I believe it's 2026, the state will mandate that we do a full reevaluation since we are 2 years out of compliance and are required to 2 years out of compliance based on our assessment ratio. And we have a total of 4 years to get within compliance. After that 4th year, the state's going to come in and force us to do a full reevaluation. In addition, there is a Maple Lanham HISP grant that the village currently has where we are required to pay 10% of the overall cost of the $800,000 project. If you'll notice in the street paving line item that we've already paid a portion of that related to the HISP. It would just be kind of identifying that of that $750,000, $80,000 of that is allocated to the Maple Lanham HISP. In addition, over the next several years, the village will have to pay for a portion of a project on Highway 167. I believe it's $70,000 in 2024 and about $70,000 over the next 5 years, something on average. We're recommending allocating about $125,000 of that of the street paving to that project. That leaves about roughly a little over $500,000 available to be allocated as the board sees fit.
Trustee Kaminsky.
Just a quick question for you. When I look at the street paving, which already has the budget number there, which I presume means that that's what we allocated a couple of years ago.
Yep, that was the large bucket for street paving.
The 741, but there are no streets attached to it. Is that correct?
So for those 2 in fiscal year 22 and fiscal year 23, we paid a portion of the Maple Lanham HISP from that bucket.
That's it.
Correct.
So we could apply that to our budget for next year for roads
Correct.
and save that borrowing.
Correct.
And I have a general comment because I think tomorrow night, when we really take a close look, we're thinking library, we're thinking recreation, we're thinking tennis courts, we're thinking potentially police hiring. I would prefer to hold the ARPA stuff until tomorrow night when we can have a much more intelligent and detailed decision as to what we might do with this money, as opposed to poking at it tonight and not getting anywhere. Because I need to digest a few things that we talked about tonight with recreation, for example, and also what we talked about last week with the library and a few other things to see directionally where I want to go. So I would like to make a motion to postpone the discussion of ARPA funds and their application until tomorrow night.
Second.
Second.
Motion made and seconded. Discussion on the motion. Trustee Hudson.
We didn't spend any money on street trees.
No.
We stripped that completely.
Correct. So the allocation there that you'll see in fiscal year 23, the account was titled ARPA Street Tree, but that was actually for the library condenser project.
Can we transfer
Can
that?
we relabel that, please?
I can create a new account line and reallocate those funds, correct?
Further discussion? All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? None opposed? Motion carries. Takes care of all items under 2024, all other budget review. Our next meeting date will be October 25th, which is tomorrow at 6:30 PM here in the Village Hall Boardroom. Thank you all for coming. Thank you all for watching. Have a good night. We are adjourned.